manager director of that. Can you start recording? All right, so we are back after the break. And we came into a good conversation topic. So let's continue with where you discuss about how we set up the internal operation within the yeah. So as I mentioned, Rukshan, I was talking about replication. If internal audit needs to get into the organization, you control across activities, it should ensure that internal audit is one step ahead of the organization. Otherwise, we can't get into the organization and let's see the control what you're doing is wrong, the control what you're doing is deficient. So in that manner, I then looked at the existing talent profile. And as a traditional organization, 60 to 65% of the talent profile was finance. And operations was also 30%, but with a high level of, I think, demotivation also, the recognition was not there. So then what I immediately did was I thought let me try to replicate the functional expertise inside the organization. So with that, fortunately, I had a set of internal auditors who were looking at new frontiers. With me coming into play, they had been moved. And with that, I slowly started doing a bit of recruiting as well. So areas such as network security, cyber security, these areas were previously not heard of, but extremely critical to the organization, especially Dialog as a telco, where the environment was becoming volatile, cyber security threats coming into play, network security threats coming into play. So with that, we did a few recruitments and existing roles also we started developing. So I should actually acknowledge my CEO, Subhambir Singh. So when I went and presented my case, I told him that I need to replicate the organization inside. And then he very gladly authorized me to get my internal auditors to actually understand each of these functions. So what I did was, my auditors got the opportunity to understand inside IT, network security, and network auditors again had an opportunity to go and refresh themselves. So what I did was, without any strings attached, I got this approval, and also the individual CXOs that must very gladly acknowledge for giving that opportunity. So they gave that opportunity for the teams to learn. And with that, what I did was I wanted my auditors to remove their policies and to wear on the hats of an operational person and lead that operation for a good month. So just you did Taridu was part of that? Yes. So Taridu was the time we have just joined Taridu, I think was a novice. Right. So in 6 months when I got into the function, and then we started slowly getting Taridu inside and other employees also under the function. What are you trying to do? Can Taridu tell what that typical day of understudy look like? So so imagining that.
So thanks, Rukshan, thanks for the opportunity. So like Arushan mentioned, prior to Arushan's appointment, we were like having one set of stream of looking how what is.
So you were there before Arushan joined?
Just 6 months back. Right. So I was there as an IT auditor. So my role was to perform the IT audits, quite a few, interact with the IT team, do the IT audits. From an operation perspective, telco operation is a whole lot of operation is going there. And digital inclusion was there coming in. Back in 2017, Dialog was actually the front runner of getting digital inclusions. Apps were there all. So we had to have the knack of getting into the business, understand the technology, what is underlying, not the traditional IT set. So with our.
What did you mean by digital inclusion?
So the roadmap that Dialog has envisioned was to become the first digital financial service provider in Sri Lanka.
Right.
So products like Genie, which is now being used, very popular, number one easy cash was there. So all these were there included at a telco. So we had to understand the basics, the platforms. So audit, like Arjun mentioned, cybersecurity was an aspect, information security, regulatory requirements, central bank was there, financial regulations were there. So everybody in the internal audit team had to get a better understanding of these each and every area. So that's what Arjun did. We, as not just as financial auditors, there was a mix: network auditors, IT auditors, as well as financial auditors. As a combination, we were better. We had the better scope. We can give a better throughput to the organization.
Okay, so the facilitator they look like for that study? Would you go into that department, sit with the people?
Definitely. So, not a typical auditor. Typical auditor would request the data sets from the customer, the client, in this case, their auditee. They will provide us the data, and we will, based on the data provided, we will give them the observation that we. So in this case, we actually had a sit with them. We were there for 1 or 2 weeks prior to the audit itself to understand the process before even the audit. So then we could have a better understanding of the process, what they did as a day in, day out.
Right.
So because as an auditor, to give them an audit issue, we need to know, we have to be thorough to challenge them. This is the thing that you are doing is a wrong thing. So what Abhushan made was that we had to first drill down and we have to understand the end-to-end process to challenge them. So different aspects were there. The data sets also, because it's a huge telco operation, we use different aspects as well, like the databases, the data warehouses. Okay, so not just so we could interact with different sources in getting data, one with the customer end and one with the support systems, IT systems. So all the data sets were there. So it was easy for us. And with them, sitting with them, we got the process understanding much better.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, in general, that you mean it's you have to go beyond the typical practices of IT audit, and you have to learn many other aspects of the audit. The domain was broader, and also you had to go through a learning curve to understand the process. Yeah, so usually the processes are in IT audit is well known, so it was it's not that complex. But in this situation, is that it's not limited to a typical process, that you have different department, different people, and different process flows that you have to understand it, and then you need to look at what are the possible loopholes, and then you have to address it. Unless until you have this understanding, you will not be able to streamline the audit flows. Yeah, so that's the idea. And you mentioned that these data collections, that you try to collect the data. So in your explanation that you were elaborating, that you had data in databases and data warehouse. So would you mind just elaborate it more then? So I think that the telco or the telco that you are working for will be having different types of customers, different type of classifications. How did you collect this data?
Yeah, so normally an organization, which large as Valor, they would have a separate team, a data warehouse team, to support them in their day-to-day activity to generate reports for their decision-making activities.
Okay.
So we as internal audit also, without raising the cost levels, we also was looking for a different path in how to get into the data access.
Okay.
So all the data warehouse team was already established. Okay, the data was there. T-1, I mean, real-time data was there. So it was easy for us. It's just a matter of making a connection. So we would have a separate server, or you may call a separate resource in our internal audit team. We just had to make a simple connection with our data warehouse team. Whatever the data that we need, we would connect with them and get the data for our audits. So it's just that once we sit with the data warehouse team, we get to know what sort of data is there in-house, in the databases itself. So we could map with our audit plan, the audit areas that we do, these particular data were already there. We didn't have to go to the audit team, the auditee itself, and pressure them to get the data. Normally that's the case.
Yeah.
But in this case, the data was already there. So it's a matter of making a connection and getting the data.
When you say connection, the personal connection, or you actually
The database connection.
Database connection.
I think even the personal connection also comes into play. Because at the end of the day, what I mean is that internal audit is not a policing function. Just don't, get into the function with your guns blazing and then request for data, cite all non-compliance. And you need to actually display empathy. I think that's the lesson I wanted to teach them when I wanted to study the function. At the end of the day, see, the bad part of internal audit is you get into a certain function, you're working with the person who's been doing that function for the past 3 to 4 years, with dedication.
Yeah.
And then you go and tell this guy that, see, you have been doing this wrong, right? Which doesn't exactly sit correct with that person as well. So what you need to first identify is you need to develop that empathy as an internal auditor. You need to work with this person, you need to understand this person, you need to understand his perspective. And once you understand his perspective, obviously when you're citing a certain control breakdown, the fact of the control breakdown then becomes, I guess, more valid. And we should understand from the functional person's perspective as to why he has been doing it. Perhaps he might be having a damn good reason for doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that is
And the person talk about it until you become
exactly
Yeah.
more connected as well.
Yeah.
And I also perhaps sometimes I think that will happen. And agree with me. The auditors give the best audit observations for you as well.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, is a person who's been doing that function. He's facing the obstructions. He's facing the daily firefighting from the client and perhaps from the other corresponding end. And that will actually give us more understanding of the issue. The moment we get this more understanding of the issue, the solution that we propose becomes more productive to the organization.
cross question. I'm sorry to maybe make a flow. Why wouldn't the internal manager of that particular department, wouldn't the person also see these issues and would the person also resolve these issues?
Yes,
Wouldn't you be kind of duplicating the person's
exactly.
Yeah.
So I always attribute it to the fact, we call it the helicopter factor. So helicopter factor is I think a psychological thing. I'll be very simple on that. So like when you're doing a certain function, because you're so engrossed in that function for let's say X number of years, sometimes you don't feel that you're doing it wrong. That is why I think in Western countries, when you're driving now, you will get a video of your entire driving trial process, which in Sri Lanka we don't have it. Yeah. So you need to, in a third party's view or in a third view, you should actually see, if you see your entire process, you yourself would identify that you are doing certain things wrong. Right?
Yeah.
So that is what actually internal audit is doing. But you need to do it in a very less intrusive. Traditionally, auditors used to, just go on, flashbang your guns, show that you are doing it wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually,
So
when audit
He discussed about how the head was photographed by his friend. So that he can correct his posture in this in office, right? So he'll do that, right?
Exactly.
So I'll say.
in the same less intrusive way. So that's why I actually wanted my auditors to first understand, so that you understand the function, you understand, you work with that person, and you exactly identify his perspective, even if there is a process violation, even if there is a process breakdown, what exactly is his reason to do this? Yeah. So with that, the solution what you provide to the specific control breakdowns become more human, become more practical. So that is what I wanted to do. So progressing ahead to Shan, this actually created, I think, slowly better value to it. And the perspective what we had those days, I mean, generally internal audit had I would say, a not very friendly view from most of the functional representatives. But I think slowly the perspectives change. And also I brought this new concept called business consulting. We will work with the function, but it will not result in an audit report. So that we work in a very progressive manner with the client, let's say for about 2 weeks, and then we just show them, see, these are the problems what we see, and you rectify it. So it's no strings attached. but it's a business consulting function that we do so that we can build more trust in the function. So progressing ahead,
we can move into the resource crunch part, the training and the part that you have automation.
So there is a progressing ahead. Usual anyway, we don't have the luxury of budgets. So traditionally, what Intel used to do is, they used to go back about 6 months down the line, get that information. And but I always felt was that, see, it's always a less amount of information what we are crunching. So that when my sample sizes are very lesser, so always lesser observations I'm getting, and also a lot of things which are penetrating through my audit sample. So now, if the traditional answer was when I put the problem to my team, see, we need more resources, and CEO was like, no additional resources, we can't invest now. So internally you have to manage. So then I had to look at a certain tool which would expand my sample size. So at that point in time, I was slowly reading on analytics. So with analytics, by that time we had one alliance license, ECL Exchange. Then what it was, I encouraged Tavindo. I saw a certain talent profile in them. I was pushing them to look at audit analytics and to let's try to use analytics and increase the sample size that we are looking at. So initially, I think when we were on a typical audit, we might be looking at about 300 transactions. I think with analytics, we I think increased up to about 20,000 on the first score, which was a major gap for us, and that 20,000 meant 10 times more red flags for us to investigate. So with that, slowly our internal audit reports started getting more comprehensive, start getting better, and also with the same level of resourcing, we were able to audit the higher one. So by this time, I was also waiting for a breakthrough because we really hadn't given a breakthrough, and we get this whistleblower regarding a certain investigation where in the whistleblower, we felt that it was specified that the people who were identified as the perpetrators were really not the perpetrators, but they are being wrongly blamed on this. So a couple of whistleblowers were coming into play, and I also felt that since I was in finance, I knew these two people as well. I also felt that the investigation identification was not very fair. So at that point in time, I go to my CEO, I tell him, let's see, I have this doubt, and there's a whistleblower, so I want to do this investigation. Then he said, can you do it? Because we have not done it. It was a typical digital forensic investigation. I said, no, I can't do it. I think I can.
Is there a typical part of the typical remit of an internal audit organization?
If we had the investigation person, but at that point, it was vacant. We did not have an investigator. So it was only myself and a couple of auditors. But we wanted to take the challenge. And so we then embarked on this investigation. So I had to refer a lot of material on how to conduct a digital forensic investigation also. And also by nature, I have this knack for reading a lot of detective stories. So I generally know how to go ahead on a normal investigation. And then what we do is we start doing this digital reconstruction of the entire fraud. So for that, I think it was the first time where we had to, I think, get the information from 10 different systems. And then we actually recreated the entire digital process. Where at one point in time, when we completed the investigation report, it contained the digital behavioral activity of, I think, almost 3 perpetrators whom we wanted to catch, including their GPS signatures. So we had multiple systems. We were referring to multiple systems. We were revisiting the places. We were reconstructing the transactions on the system, the access controls, the GPS signatures at this point in time, and so on. So we actually digitally recreated the entire fraud and the perpetrators' activity even with the GPS signatures. And we proved that these are the actual perpetrators who had conducted the fraud. and the two people who actually got caught were not responsible. So I think that was the breakthrough we were looking at, and that created I think Tarindu earned the reputation of bad annual all year, where in the afternoons Tarindu was the IT auditor, and in the evening Tarindu and myself we used to burn the midnight oil doing this digital reconstruction. So I think that report I can still remember Supun telling me, Supun, within the next minute of the audit report, this is one of the most fantastic reports I've seen. And that was, I think, one of Dialogue's best digital forensic investigation reports. And that actually turned the table for us. So with that, I think Tarindu can elaborate. I think the team had the confidence that they can do new things. That kind of a investigation report, even I personally didn't think that we can do it. But it was only because of the passion we had, we did that report. And also, personally, we had the satisfaction that we really caught the necessary perpetrator rather than, to necessary people being caught.
Yeah.
And also, I think CEO and the management had an entirely different view of how internal audits started doing work. So I think that kind of transpired into almost 47 plus investigations in the next 2 years itself. And I think we were sometimes working on certain frauds 48 hours non-stop. So because we were unable to time, and as a telco, you have plenty of this kind of activities. So
can you explain a little bit about how you started using ML and then?
Yes,
sir.
So
Yes.
then, Roshan, one of the major obstructions that we faced was that with investigations coming into play, normal audit plan running with analytics. Now we had a major resource crunch. I knew that the team was burning out. So, and the second part was, it was very frustrating to see that when all these investigations, okay, it gets detected on a certain, control breakdown or a certain observation, it gets detected, we go in, we investigate, just to find out that even at that point in time, the company has lost millions. The perpetrator, it was too late.
Was a later of about a week or 2 or a month?
Sometimes even a month, sometimes even 2 weeks. Sometimes like I think at one point we had this reputation where the moment I get into the function, the perpetrator runs.
Right. Okay.
So, but still we lost money. So this was the management did not, the CEO did not ask the question, Aroshan, why all this investigation, why all these frauds are happening when internal audit is there. But then I think the internal audit is a retrospective function.
Yeah.
So there's a second line of defense which has to detect, which doesn't happen. And also the rate where the company was expanding, the rate transactions were being complex. The fraudsters were also being very, very innovative in their method. First fraud is entirely different from second fraud.
Okay.
So
Finding a pattern of the fraud is even
was very, very tough. So then with that, and I knew that the team was approaching a burnout. And also the good part was that the team was gelling very well. The conventional auditors and IT auditors were gelling very well, but still we were just going on. And then what I felt was, okay, I need to find out a mechanism where at least if we can pre-detect the frauds happening, we can stop this financial loss to the organization.
So you towards the prevention side.
The prevention side. So with that line, I come across again this old movie when I was looking for a film called Minority Report, starring Kapoor, and that very old movie.
Yeah.
But then the concept actually made me interested. Where these three androgenous people would be linked to a certain neural network, and whenever criminal want to commit some kind of an act, before a few milliseconds, it gets triggered by the artificial intelligence androgens, and then police goes and apprehends the suspect. So then the physical crime doesn't happen, only the intention. So I was thinking on this line, and I just got with the time when I was just telling, I think we need to look at a solution. And also, then the major problem what we had was, okay, fine, to detect this, we needed to have our use cases. So what do you mean by a use case? So use case is, if you take the system for example, and you want the system to detect a certain fraud, you need to tell the system that these are when a certain person or a collection of people are doing this kind of activities or this kind of violations. right? And if these parameters are violated, then that is a fraud. That's how you teach the machine.
Yeah.
How to
Yeah.
catch a fraud.
Yeah.
So now
I would say
challenge
the conditions.
the conditions.
Yes.
Yeah. So now the problem was how to identify these conditions. Now I was working with a set of conventional auditors. Conventional auditors, in their mindset, they think that it is through their audit knows how they catch the fraud. Even for me, I mean, it's not a prefix model on how you exactly catch a certain fraud or go ahead with a certain audit observation. Because of the tacit knowledge what you build with your experience when you look at the transactions, when you look at the processing of the transactions, delays, certain patterns, then you identify that something's not correct and you go and detect.
The typical slipping out way of audits. Right?
Of audit, yes. Same way, even the police would catch a certain crime. Also,
Yes.
like that. Now the problem was how exactly to create the use case from this tacit knowledge of a conventional audit. Now conventional auditors, the moment I bring in an IT auditor to the table, these guys are a bit reluctant. Because at the end of the day, every person, when you bring in tech onto the table for a conventional person, they are worried that they are going to lose their job. So that's going to be a threat of their job.
Yeah.
So now I had this magnanimous task of converting this tacit knowledge of these internal auditors to use cases, where I could then feed it to the machine, where then I could train the machine to track the non-compliances in a more productive or faster manner. So to create this use case, what I need to then do is I need to sit with the conventional auditor, and then point by point, I need to decode his intuition, the way he captures, the way he thinks that certain thing is not correct, into single lines of parameters or conditions.
Okay.
Say for an example, when a person feels that, I will leave through a video seconds.
So you can give a use case and just also the example. Before you do that, I just want to ask from Nabiwas now. In a typical application, IT application, this is telco, right? So, and a surveillance module has to be there to detect some of these cases. I suppose the problem is that these use cases aren't part of that design anyway, right? So you kind of
you have a set of predefined use cases, which if you take a revenue assurance is anyway given control framework which the telco should have. But the only problem is with Trump. Number one, you have a lot of systems which are homegrown. Right? It has a lot of loopholes. And these loopholes get discovered daily by users. The second part is,
right? Yeah.
The second part,
that's why they infiltrate and then
exactly, and they try to misuse that.
Yeah.
And then the second part is you get these new patch managements or developments that we do, and then with that might create further vulnerabilities which are not been detected or documented.
So the technology changes outside.
And third part is the intention and the opportunity. You get a person that's been doing it for 5 years, good 5 years, that specific function, and suddenly he has this urge to commit some kind of a fraud. He will find a certain way. So it can be by his internal. It can be by himself, or perhaps the most common method is they do a collusion. Say for example, I think one of the most common issues what we saw was that the assignment of credit limits. So if you have a friend, if you're at a call center, you tend to slowly increase the credit limit of the person. I mean,
now I understand why it's so difficult to get a credit limit.
Now it's there.
Now I know. Okay.
So like that, it's ever evolving. And also the perspective, I think for the 8 years we were in play of frauds, the initial set of fraudsters whom we encountered versus the last set of fraudsters whom we encountered, technically and conceptual wise, I think they were miles apart. Yeah. So we always have the challenge of upkeeping ourselves with the latest fraudsters, and that's where you really need something like machine learning to keep up with it. Because human mind is something really, I would say, fantastic. So the mindsets of the fraudsters were like, really great. And certain combinations, I think even 1,000 years we can't conceptualize how these guys have done it.
So you found them from the local market. So all of them are in the same.
All of them the local market. So then, as I mentioned, so we were having this burnout. Slowly, what I did was I started doing this change management. I wanted to get into this change management, and long hours with conventional auditors, convincing them that see, this is only a tool, artificial intelligence. analytics is only a tool. I need to convince them. This is only there to ease your job. It's not there to replicate that. And IT auditors like Tarindu, they are not here to steal your job. They are only here to support you and to ensure that you do a better job. So like that, then what I did was I started forming these individual cells. So these individual cells, what I told them was, see, you have to create me this use case, and the conventional auditor is the owner of this use case. But you need to carefully convert it to individual parameters where after you create the use case, the computer should be able, in the same way as you detected it, the computer should be able to detect it. So that was the challenge. And all these cells, Tandu and my other IT auditors were a part of it as the facilitators, but the conventional auditors were made owners of this use case.
Okay. The first question in this case, in roughly, I understand that introduction in this case happens in many other organizations in the world. Like they don't look at this enterprise picture, but we have many systems globally grown, provided that you don't see the big picture, but you can find a lot of loopholes in it. Like let's say that the solution is architecture and enterprise architecture. It's a similar situation, right? So we don't have a way that we look at the enterprise as a big picture and then go down. So it is opposite now. When organizations are grown, we have different situations that for a specific situation we build a system, and then for another case we have another system. So we will be having multiple systems, so different. I would say in this case for customer oriented. So how many systems that you targeted for this auditing?
I think we had more than 50 plus.
Yeah. Are all of these 50 systems together, or you identify?
We had a certain time. So based on that timeline, we ensured that at least one system is audited once in 36 months. That was the
Once in
36 months, but ideally, yeah. So I mean, the audit horizon is once in 36 months at least, like, because we had a massive resource crunch as well. But at least we ensure that we have given the assurance to the board that at least once in 36 months, we all the systems will be audited at least once in their audit.
In a typical use case, how many systems will the user touch?
It depends. It depends on the scenario or the use case what you want to create. Sometimes one use case might even cut through 20 different systems. Because at the end of the day, when you want to create a use case, you want certain information headers for this use case. These information headers, you can't get it from one system.
Right.
I mean, ideally, I think in a very developed telco, it should be in the ERP. But it's not the case because frontline system is sometimes developed in-house. Yes, multiple headers. So you have to get certain headers from that database, and then you have to get the SAP master data, and then you get a set of headers. So like that, there might be even 10 to 15 systems where we need to exactly tag them, and based on that only we need to create the parameter.
So there is machine learning algorithm that you might set up finally.
Yeah.
You combine all the system data into single.
Yes. So I'll come there. I'll explain how we have actually. So once these use cases were in place, we then created this rule-based engine.
Yeah.
So I think IT auditors had a really tough time. Even when the use case is there, then you need to exactly tag for that specific parameters in the use case, which information headers to grab from which system.
Okay. Another cross question that I understood that we understand that the use cases are being identified.
Yes.
So how did you identify the use cases? Use cases are pertaining to the customer services, or how?
It depends on the, I think the ideal pointer which I initially used was number one, the fraud, mob, and audit observation.
Okay.
So that was the focus, right?
Okay.
So then I take a certain fraud. With that fraud, then I try to identify, okay, fine, this fraud, how has this happened? So then I would I would go to SAP, whether there's a SAP role profile violation, whether there's a delegation of authority violation, whether there is password sharing. Yeah. So like these individual parameters, I will then try to isolate and label. So these are parameters which have enabled for this fraud to materialize. So then what we do is we actually take this use case to the system, we get the entire database of transaction, we ask the system, okay, fine, track us what are the instances where a password violation has happened. Then you track us what are the instances where there has been, let's say, a system approval which is outside normal office hours. Then you track whether there has been a transaction where an alternative authorizer has authorized it.
Okay.
So like that. So these are the parameters of conscious. So these are the anomalies actually, the red flags. So then once the use cases were created, and then we created the rule-based engine. And once the rule-based engine result comes into play, that's also a massive amount of red flags what you see, massive amount of red herrings. So you take these red herrings and one by one, you have to again go back the function to sit with the conventional auditors and then detect whether what the machine has detected through the rule-based engine is accurate.
Okay, let's talk about and just to understand this rule-based engine. So from technical ground, so how did you build this rule-based engine? What technologies for people to understand? Yes, it's interesting.
So, like Anush mentioned, our focus was on the audit observation as well as the recurrence as well. So, take from a risk perspective, if we drill down. So, we wanted to make this fraud detection framework.
Yes.
So, as a telco operator, customer service is one aspect that is imperative. It's important to have a customer service. So the channels that we approach customers, there were a number of channels in the sales team. We take sales marketing team, there are a number of channels. And each individual team has their different systems.
Okay.
So fraud can happen at any area.
Okay.
Because for a telco, the revenue comes from when we get more customers registered. The more they use, the average we say average revenue per user. The more a particular customer brings in, our revenue goes up, and our top line grows as well as the bottom line shows the value.
Okay.
So we focused on that area, for example, as a use case, the sales and the marketing channels.
Okay.
So we combined the audit observations, the previous audit observations, if there is any particular kind of fraud or audit observation has happened in that particular area, and as well as the area that we extrapolate that, what sort of risk that we see.
Okay.
So, for example, then what we do, we create this rule engine based on the audit observation itself.
Okay.
So then, like Arshana mentioned, we go to the test knowledge, whoever has the auditors.
Okay.
We actually, like as an IT project.
Yes.
We go to the drawing board, we see the scenario, what are the areas that a fraud can occur. The areas, the scenarios we mapped as a rule engine.
Okay.
So the data was there already, like I mentioned.
In general, you have a flow. So you have a data flow. And then you try to find out, okay, in which part of the flow this fraud can happen.
Correct. So our main focus, an example is the sales channels. So the data flow is there, what sort of systems are getting impacted, and what sort of the rule engines that we can build on.
Yes.
So the control point violations. And so that was one area that we built this rule engine, for example. From a regulatory perspective, a person can only register 5 connections under his name. So that is one point. We see that our audit observations that we are reporting, a particular person will have more than 5 connections registered. There is a control violation. That will immediately become a rule engine rule for us.
So we say more than 5, what you're saying is we take a completely longer timeline, right? Not for a certain point of time.
For the given
3 months, the person has taken more than 20, something like that.
Correct.
But in a given moment of time, it's 5, then the person doesn't violate technically.
Correct.
But that's what I'm saying.
That's a regulatory where the TRI has mentioned that a particular person under his NIC can have 5
Connections.
different. So that in itself will become a rule engine.
And the violation will be penalized.
From a particular, I would say, telco vendor. Right? So I would say if the telco vendor is X, under the telco vendor, a particular customer can have only 5 connections. So would that be divided into different type of connections, or it's online mobile connections or broadband?
That can happen.
That can happen.
So telcos actually offer different services.
Yes.
Voice, mobile,
Data.
and TV as well. So the regulatory was one aspect, as well as we actually mapped the particular sales agents. Whoever comes, there is a vast retailer network.
Yes.
So in order to give them, motivate them for the sales, we needed to compensate with them some sort of bonus.
Yes.
For them to
Yeah.
achieve our targets. That's our main goal on how we do our sales. So they can bring in different because they see this opportunity day in day out. They are doing the sales. They like Arjun mentioned that the opportunity is there to do a fraud if they want money. So we need to be on our toes and we need to understand their process. So for example, retailers are given a target set of targets. If they achieve, they will get an extra additional bonus. So for the month of end of the month, if they haven't achieved that target, they will try to activate bogus connections.
Very good point. You can, sorry.
Please go ahead.
I think, Aroshan, you can just probably talk about how the bonus drove frauds.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Roshan, I think any retail business, this phenomenon happens where when you have a certain, let's say, certain year end or a month end or a quarter end period, retailers always to encourage sales, but is occupying. It's a volume-based incentive. Hit a certain volume, we give you this much. You double that volume, we give you this much. So freeloading, happens like crazy. But only problem, and then what we felt was that even in the prepaid sector, you get a lot of fictitious activation. So perhaps there might be a certain distributor and you met a X number of retailers, and what they would do is I think by the 25th of the month when you get the salaries, they'll quickly pool up the money, they'll purchase the things which are being unsold, and then they will start activating these things. After 2 or 3 days, they just tell us more. Someone wants to check them. So
the activity get qualified.
The activity can get qualified for the specific incentive.
Yeah.
And then the organization pays the incentive. But at the end of the day, why this organization pays the incentive is that by increasing the number of connections, that means that's an active revenue generating user created for the organization.
Yeah.
But then when you do it on a fictitious basis, the organization actually loses it. Even the cost of the SIM is, thrown in. And also it's a misuse of organization's resources. So the phenomenon what we saw was that sales, if you take certain retailers until about the 20th of that specific month, there will be very minimal sales. And suddenly after about 25th, 26th, almost 90% of his sales quota is hit. So then these are the scenarios what we want to capture.
That's a very good case where
that's one of the ideal cases where we wanted to create this machine learning model as well. And also the second part was that there were certain frauds where we felt that the prepaid model could be used for even money laundering. We felt certain, we had certain cases where we felt that certain individuals, they got the, they would load money into the prepaid. The wallet, exactly, the digital wallet. They would load, let's say, about 5 to 8 million, and then money would just lay there for about a good 1 year. And then after that, you see the money being washed out.
Okay.
And then, when you reconstruct that, and that was one of the last cases I was working on, where money was then being washed out to certain non-Sri Lankan nationals who had tourist visas. And where the organization had a massive risk of getting caught to anti-money laundering money laundering crimes. So like that, there were a lot of permutations where people could misuse, because at the end of the day, prepaid cash is not cash and it's not being subjected to the usual central bank's supervision because it's a product. But then this product could be then misused by certain people. So then we wanted the product which could detect this and exactly curb the risk to the organization. So with that only we wanted to create this machine learning model, because even the rule-based engine, we always felt that the rule-based engine also detected the specific phenomenon after the thing has got materialized. So once the penalty had got slapped on the organization, it's pointless of me going and detecting it and checking how it is set up.
Yeah.
So with that we wanted to get into this model of machine learning. So with that we wanted to do the first testing. So we actually didn't have the resourcing also at that point in time. We got this intern from Smith, and we actually created our own data scientist. So took about 1 year. I think many nights were being spent on but he had a good background in statistics. So whatever said and done, when you're creating a data scientist, you need to get someone who has knowledge on statistics. So everything runs on statistics. Based on that, I think his English knowledge was also not very much up to the mark. Tarindu was teaching him on the Python part, Python programming. But at those days, mind you, this was 2018, 2019. Even ChatGPT was never unheard of. Now, these days, I was just generating a script on Python within a few seconds. Yeah. But those days, life was very tough. So we had to create the entire scripting from scratch. So Tarindu was teaching him on scripting and using the algorithms. I was teaching him on getting the big knowledge into place, how to identify trends, how to identify user scenarios. And based on that, we slowly start progressing. And on this distributor scenarios, I think we created about 12 scenarios like this, where freeloading happens, fictitious activations after 10 days being deactivated, people below the age of 18 being doing the activations, and also one of the classical ones what they have done was multiple SIMs being activated through a single number, single phone. So what they do is they just have one phone, put the individual SIMs, activate it, and then remove the SIM. So that specific signature is recorded in the system, and that is one of the primary points where we can capture within a certain period of, let's say, within 3 to 4 days, you get 100 to 200 SIMs activated with one device. That means definitely it's a red flag. So like that, we create this. Those are the observations from conventional auditors, which have now been converted to use cases, and that being filled in the system. So with that, we slowly start building our machine learning model. So we had the rule-based engine. Now it's a matter of transposing it to machine learning. So with that, Tarindu and the team, they slowly start creating the machine learning. It was a tedious task. So the initial set of results, and also, mind you, gentlemen, all these things were done with zero investment. We did not have budgets of the organization.
You only had the, I would say, zero investment in the set. We have the effort, but I think we don't have financial.
We don't have the financial support. Where I think one of the major things, I think Tarindu and the team were continuously bugging me for to get funding for a good algorithm, a paid algorithm. Whereas I think we only had to contain ourselves with the free algorithms in place. So the algorithms were about 4 to 5 years old when we were using it. So I think we were using SVM, nearest neighbor, those kind of free algorithms in the system. But then
any other software is even free.
And Python was only one. Yeah. That was one, and Hadoop was there to do the cleansing. So like that, we used a bunch of free. Only thing I think good thing was we had a good machine given by the organization, capacity machine, and the data scientist, and only a bunch of very energized and determined people to go ahead with the solution. And then finally we developed the solution. By 2019 we had the solution, and the solution actually evolved into a certain point. I think it was actually a friendly challenge I gave Tarindu, where the company had a problem where distributors and retailers were sometimes failing, into perhaps financial management or risk management and so on. So it was kind of like a byproduct, but it became a good product where we actually programmed the system to identify all the failed retailers for the past 5 years. Right? And before that, we actually tracked and labeled the dubious behaviors of this distributor. Say, for an example, you would see that their reorder levels were continuously getting, the credit levels were getting extended, not paying on time. Their connections being disconnected too frequently, customer complaints. So tags like that, warning tags, say red herrings like that. Then all these behaviors we programmed the system, and actually we came up with a solution. Kind of predict the distributor or the retailer failure at least 2 to 3 weeks before the failure. Now, for telcos, this becomes very critical. For a certain geographical line, if your retailer visits about if your customer visits about 3 or 4 continuous retail points and he can't get the specific prepaid card, he might go to the alternate operator.
So distributor fails means
that specific area will fail. And that specific area's revenue might fail, and also customer dissatisfaction might mean that the customer switched to a different operator. which we couldn't afford at that point in time. So by this, the system actually spinned out possibilities or potential retailers may go out of business because they have been displaying certain characteristics which past failed retailers have been displaying.
Right.
So that kind of, I think that was a good, we call it the byproduct, but I think that was one of the ideal forerunners for the second level of defense in the organization to happen, and also to enforce the predictive capability of internal audit and the importance of internal audit coming in as a predictor of business failure. So I think that we should have done the evolution, but I think by that time I had to leave the organization. So
we'll take a quick break again.
Yeah.
I think especially that let me give you sounds good. Settle down.
Yeah, like the meeting.
Meeting.
Yeah, yes. Gentlemen, I will be having a meeting for like 20 to 25 minutes. Is that okay?
We'll have a side break.
yes.
So they have to listen to some things that even it's an interesting use case. We are conducting an audit for hotel stays. It's it's I think I mean it's not that same use case. So we found a similar case that certain developers came